Hi, Steve.
Hi, Jim.
So tell me, sir, are you ready for some madness?
Madness. Jim, I am ready for March Madness, but only if it deals with vinyl.
And welcome once again, everyone, to Two Guys Talking About Records, a vinyl community podcast where each week we two guys get together. And, well, you know what? We're going to talk about records. and it is what we do each and every week and thoroughly enjoy it. And we've got a special one today. Boy, howdy. My name is Jim, and I own a record store, and I apparently just said, boy, howdy.
I still say, boy, howdy. Well, howdy. A little mini pearl there. I am Steve, and I am a record collector.
I threw you for a loop. I apologize there, sir. So we've got a big one coming up today, folks. Last year, right around this time, we introduced a kind of a multi-week just idea through the show where we did March Madness, but only of the vinyl variety because we didn't want to get in trouble with the good folks that play basketball this time of year, and they've got that other little tournament thing going on. But we thought we would do another March Vinyl Madness tournament this year, which would allow you, our listeners and viewers, to chime in and help us determine what is the best of. Oh, that's a tease, Steve. We'll tell them what the content is going to be here in a little bit. How's that?
All right. Sounds perfect.
Meticulously researched on both of our parts. And this was a tough one to put together, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. I really had to sit and think. And Jim kept going, hey, you got yours done? Yeah, you got yours done. And I finally said, oh, screw it. Here we go. Get it done. No more thinking.
We're going to jump into this tournament midway and start with essentially the Sweet 16, but a qualifier round because of what we've picked to narrow down with you folks. So, again, we'll get to all of that here in just a couple of moments on the podcast because it's always a lot of fun diving into it. But let's say we just dive right into our most recent pickups and additions to the collection. I'd only have three, but I got one really nice one this week. Nothing huge, but a nice one this week. But what do you have, sir?
Well, we're going to begin with a little band out of Austin, their brand new album. The group is called Grocery Bag because why not? So I saw them on a YouTube clip with their new music video. They're out of Austin. They call it psych punk. I kind of thought of it as more hard rock, but I really am loving this group. I think they're wonderful.
Cool vinyl.
I like, cool vinyl with clear with pink splattered all over. When I ordered it off Bandcamp, they have a thing, comment. Put in comment down there. I says, could they autograph it for me? And they did. They autographed it for me. So,
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, so that was really nice. I'm just assuming it's their autograph, okay? I mean, it could have brought anybody from the street. Just sign for it.
It's one of the factory workers in there. Hey, what the hell?
Yeah.
No, I'm sure it's legit. The Bandcamp stuff.
Yeah.
The artists are really connected with their fans through Bandcamp in a lot of cases.
It is. So it's Grocery Bag, Break You. It's kind of like a larger EP. It's 7 songs, 45 RPM, which I already then put on the next record at 45 RPM. And the White Stripes just sounded like mice. So
like the Chipmunks.
Really loving that one. Okay, so now the next one. If it was just my straight channel, we would show full frontal nudity, but we're trying to be better on this channel with that. So I got to try to put my hands... figures around here. This is a group called Los Gators Locos. Okay, here we go. And it's called Psychobilly Baptism. All right, there we go. So there is a naked lady being crucified on a cross. It's a cartoon, folks. It's not for real, with a evil looking person with a knife. But it's psychobilly, all right, man. I saw this in a record store, and I look at the cover and go, what the heck is this about? And so I bought it, and look at that splattered vinyl again. It's kind of a clear with red splatter for the blood. I guess the guy has a bloody knife. This, again, was very enjoyable, very good. It has such great songs as Get Their Head Kicked In Tonight, Space Fever, Hate Train, Juvenile Delinquent, Headhunters, God Ain't Listening, Hunting Humans, Psychobilly Baptism, Orgy of Blood and Guts. Yeah, Love Demon. Oh, boy. And there we'll cover up again, folks. And
So it's a nice family record, is what you're saying.
It sure is. I can't wait to bring the grandkids in. Hey, Psychobilly.
Now, how does that stack up against the Cramps? Obviously, they're influenced by.
They're influenced by. Nothing can stand up against the Cramps in my book. Nothing in the world. But it's fun. I mean, I like the music. They did a nice job with it.
All right.
Recent pickup. This is the second album from the Cynics. The Cynics are out of Pittsburgh, a great garage rock band. They started, I think, in the late 80s, still going strong, have their own record label where they put out stuff. And I tried to get into that record label because there's a store in there during COVID. But, well, whatever reason, they wanted to shut down during COVID, so they weren't open for me. Yeah. So I was a little disappointed. Total black vinyl. Cynics, just great, straight ahead garage rock. That's what they do. They've put out a lot of albums, very good music, and I don't have to use my finger to cover any naughty bits on the album covers. So
very good.
You have that benefit. I recently purchased this. This was a Velvet Underground bootleg. A newer one, one of those new bootlegs that come out where they take an old bootleg and we make it kind of new. The vinyl, this one came out like it's 6 different ways with the different vinyl. Mine's is just black. But the label looks like a bootleg there, just a white label. The concert was in Philadelphia in 1970, January 1970. Sound quality sucks.
Oh, yeah.
It's not that great. It's the guitar at times is pretty good, then not. The vocals, sometimes you can hear them pretty good, other times not. It's you're going to roll the dice with a bootleg.
Well, a lot of times
even the new ones
with bootlegs of that era, it is not. And it's sad to say, but it's not always about the best listening quality. It's about the rarity of the content. And if you're a fan, if you are the VU, then that's something that becomes important, and it supersedes the sound.
It does. And so that's why I bought it. But it's not one that I got to play that recording again. My best ones is I have that box set of their Matrix sessions where they went live, all that live music, and that's really good.
But that was a legit official release, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so, or at least it was recorded on their soundboard, so it sounds really good.
A little better.
Yep. MoFi bought this Cloud9, The Temptations.
Cool.
I have no Temptations. I used to, but it's just one of those. You can only buy so much. I saw this come out MoFi, so instead of being able to go buy the album fairly inexpensive, I decided let's go all out. Sadly, and I guess I must have known this, maybe I didn't pay attention, it's 45 RPM. Yeah. Now, the Temptation albums are not known to be very long.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, 30 minutes maybe. So side 1, they do Cloud9, Heard It Through the Grapevine. That's it, 2 songs. Then side 2 is just Runaway Child, Running Wild. 1 song. And you go to side 3 where you get actually 4 songs on there inside. And finally the 4th side, 3 songs. You spend a lot of time hopping up and down on this sucker.
Might as well be playing 12-inch singles at that point.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jim. Especially if you could have one of those long spindles like I used to have, I would drop them down.
That's really good for a MoFi record, I hear too.
It is, yeah, exactly. I remember as a kid, that was our little record player, and I would I bought my albums, I would have them stacked up and not thinking a thing about it. Nope. But it's a great album. It's just the two songs and you're up. It's like, right a fucking second from them kind of a thing. Oh well, that's my fault. But I mean, I'm enjoying it.
Good,
So very,
good,
very
good.
good. And yeah, but I'll end with that.
Okay.
There's more.
Nice batch this week, sir. I only have a few, and start off with a pair for the Michigan collection from Marshall Crenshaw. Nice little 80s rocker in here. Not offensive, light rock from Marshall Crenshaw in this case. This is his self titled album from 1982. I'm trying
Yeah.
to think of what the biggest cut's on here. There She Goes Again, I think, is, well, it's the first cut, and She Can't Dance were a couple of the bigger ones on this. And if you look really closely, this appears to be autographed by Marshall Crenshaw. I can show that there.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have, obviously, any way to verify that that is an actual Marshall Crenshaw autograph on here, but at that same token, as we talked before, I think we did an episode on autographs, I have no reason to believe that it isn't. So, and I looked online, and it does seem to match a lot of his other autographs that show up in a quick search on that. So fun stuff, and I can't believe I didn't have any Marshall Crenshaw. These come through the store a lot, and
They do.
I've just never really kept one. I saw this one and the other one come in, and I thought, oh, now's the time. You know, I can get the little nifty little autograph one. The second one was Marshall Crenshaw's Field Day. That was his follow-up album to that one from 1983. Our Town, One Day with You, What Time Is It? And Whenever You're on My Mind, I think were the big ones on Field Day. But yeah, I mean, it's just good, solid rock from the 80s. Marshall has always done a solid job of doing that. So cool stuff, cool additions.
And he always had a nice haircut.
Indeed.
You know, he
Always
has
better
nice
than
and
mine.
short. Well done. Yeah, good young man. You'd bring home to mother.
There you go. Now, third, and this is it's not a huge one, but it's a big one. Discogs has this pumped up a lot into the triple digits, 100, 150 around in there. It shows up from 1988. And I've seen this a few times in the store before, and have decided to kind of pull the trigger on one of these. It's the Tracy Chapman, her self-titled Tracy Chapman from 1988, with the hype sticker still. That's the other cool part of this. It's still, and you could pick this up for $8.49 back in 1988 with the best new artist. So yeah, this is the first press from Tracy Chapman with Fast Car on there. Of course, she's got her ticket For You and Talking About a Revolution. Great stuff on here. Nice little mellow sidetrack from some of the stuff that I normally have and bring in. But yeah, got the inner sleeve as well, and the vinyl is really nice. So,
You know, I spent $8.49 in 1988 for that album, and really liked it. And so when I was bringing stuff back in, I thought, okay, I need to get that Tracy Chapman. I looked at the price, go, say what?
Yeah.
How much? Really? I think probably helped take off is when one of the country artists, who I can't think of his name, redid that song.
Covered Fast Car, and I can't remember offhand either, but that was a big thing. That did a resurgence. And that album from Tracy Chapman, her self-titled, was just reissued, I think, back in 25 last year. And we got a few copies of it for the store on the reissue side. They went off the shelves as quickly as you could imagine, and then were kind of out of print and out of stock. I haven't checked the prices on that reissue. I would imagine it's just a little bit better up than where they were, but still a great album to have and to bring in.
Yeah, it is. Very good album.
Well, cool. As we do each and every week, by the way, we will put together a Spotify playlist so you folks can listen in on these cuts that we're talking about here and the ones that we're going to get to in just a minute through our March Vinyl Madness. So you can find that over on our the description, rather. It's in the BLEAVE Network description, as well as in the description of the YouTube channel. All you have to do is scroll down and click on that. You'll be taken to the Spotify playlist, and you can listen in on a lot of these cuts that we cover.
So before we get to the tournament, we have to bring up big news. I mean, this is humongous. This is, in the vinyl world, this is going to shake things up like an earthquake.
Oh, my.
Kiss. The famous Kiss is coming in with that liquid-filled vinyl.
They're jumping on
Oh,
the fad wagon.
yeah. Kiss is very good at jumping on band. I wonder if they ever did the 3-inch singles, Jim. I'm not sure. You would
Not
think they
yet.
would have made the little not yet. You would think they would make their own little record player for that, but yeah, I saw that popped up on my email. You get these Kiss albums, liquid filled vinyls. So now you can add, to your 50 copies of Destroyer that you already have in all these different forms, a liquid filled Destroyer along with other ones.
Along. And those will probably run in that $100 range, is my guess, right?
I would guess it would, yes, because
So here's the thing, though, Steve. We can no longer pin that directly on Gene Simmons and the Kiss, the corporate entity known as Kiss, because they sold all of their rights a couple of years ago. So
yeah,
this is the new rights holder trying to get that milk off of there.
trying to get the milk off.
Yeah.
There's a lot you can do. Yes, and what can we do here? You could just see the boardroom going. What if the what ifs?
Liquid
And
filled everything, one after the other. A
yes,
little beyond
so
me. So, well, Kiss
yep.
Destroyer obviously is from the 1970s, isn't it? And my
Hmm.
editions, all of my editions this week were from the 80s. And it was only a couple of
Ah,
weeks back, Steve, that we had that special guest, Steve, from the I Love the 80s podcast on, where I extolled my just admiration for the music of the 1980s. And you're there with you, but you are all over the
yep.
map. So, folks,
Yeah.
yeah, so it is time once again for our tournament, the March Vinyl Madness tournament on Two Guys Talking About Records. I think I build this as the only bracket that matters, Steve. So this is
Yeah.
this is the one. Forget that other one where they're playing basketball. This is the one you folks want to pay attention to because it's trend setting. How's that?
It is. And, sadly, last year, the album that Jim showed won. And
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time understanding what was wrong with the audience. I think this year we have a more educated audience. I
Yes.
really do. These
All
people
right.
are much more in tune to what great music really is. So you're going to be in trouble this year, Jim.
For those who we'll see. We'll see. That sounds like a challenge, but we'll see. We got some great ones. For those of you who are newer to this and you don't recall what we did last year, we had a tournament to help decide what was the most essential album to have in your collection. And ultimately, the Who, Who's Next rather, came out on top. And that was, I think, it was kind of a neat surprise on there. But we had a lot of cool albums. This year, Steve and I have gone a little bit of a different direction. We have our own opinions on what decade is the best for music. As we talked about in the 80s a couple of weeks back, and we talk about each and every week, we have a wide variety popping up here. So this year for our March tournament, we are going to turn it over to you folks, our listeners and viewers, to help us decide which decade is the best. It comes out on top for music. We're not going to limit it to rock music. We're not going to limit it to jazz or anything. It's going to be kind of open. But we've got a lot of decades to cover too. I joked on my live here on our channel the other day that this is going to make you feel old, and it quite very could make you feel old because how many decades are we covering here, Steve?
Guys, 8 decades?
8 decades.
Yeah,
The
man.
1950s through, well, 2026. So half of the 2020s, a little better than half of the 2020s here. That's a lot of decades and a lot of music to cover, and a lot for folks to consider when they try to pick out who is the best as far as which is the best for creating music in the decades. And I think when we break this down decade by decade, it is each has their important moments and their important artists. But I think, Stephen, in a little of the research I've done on this, it really is going to come down to depending upon your age, your cultural connections, things that impacted you when you were growing up, but essentially your generation and your generational connections is what is going to determine what your favorite decade of music is.
Also, if you're cool or not. I'm going to just have to
Correct.
throw that in there because if you choose mine, obviously you're very cool.
We will get to our selections here and explain the qualifier round first and the mathematics. I'm not a math guy, but we had to do some math to make this work right. Not the strong suit. But I tossed over to our good friend Grok, Steve, and I threw this question out. I said, generally speaking, from the 1950s through today, what is considered to be the best decade for music? And kicking this out exactly as I thought it would, it said there is no single universal winner when you're speaking generally. They talk about it being a highly subjective and often influenced by personal nostalgia, age, and generation, as I said, and what genres someone values most, i.e., rock, innovation versus pop production or hip hop's rise. But it also points to, that being said, that large scale polls over the past few years and broad cultural consensus tend to point to a few decades as the most frequently praised. And so again, the AI will dig through all sorts of online content to pull up discussions and posting boards and polls and just general information about what it considers. And it found that the 1970s and the 1980s consistently come out on top in major US focused surveys of adults overall. There was a prominent U.gov poll, or YouGov poll, I guess is what they call it, from 2021, with over 1,700 respondents. The 1980s edged out slightly at 22%, followed by the 1970s at 21%, while the 1960s and 90s came in together at 14%, and later decades, like the 2010s, got much less, as did the 50s. Now, this is going to be a tough one for us to break down, because as Steve and I were discussing the types of albums to represent the decades through here, we had to, and in my case, Steve, I had to purposely overlook some very, let's call it obvious choices to represent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we talked some about the influence of Elvis. I got an Elvis behind me here. That's for show.
Yeah.
But I don't have a original Elvis album in my collection. I've got a box set, a comprehensive one in my collection. Not to downplay Elvis's importance in the 50s and 60s. Same thing in the 60s with the Beatles. I don't think either of us chose a Beatles album to represent, because I think, in my opinion, that would have been, I guess, too obvious. Is that a good way to put it?
Mm-hmm. Well, last year, I think some of the very best albums of each decade. Last year, we were pulling that on essential albums, and
Yep.
I was looking, thinking maybe, oh no, we used that one. Oh, because they were the ones we said this is it. So tried to look at it a little differently, it was quite difficult when you think of 10 years and what album says this decade to you. And so it became a personal opinion when we think of that decade. God, this album kind of represents.
Yep. And we, as your humble podcast hosts, are again putting out, I think the criteria was it had to be in our collection. We had to feel that it did represent the decade in some way, shape, or form, but not necessarily all of the music through that decade, just something that we have chosen to champion that decade as we move forward in the tournament. Is that a good way to put it?
It is. There's so many genres that you could go into, and this was not genre specific, as you will see.
Exactly. And feel free to chime in. Again, we normally save this for the last, but chime in the comments and let us know of some of the other albums that you would argue are representative of that. Getting back to the little poll I did on there, the survey of the polls, if you will, to kind of find out. It said among rock-oriented classic music fans, we're getting kind of genre-specific here, the 1960s really came out on top with groups like the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, Motown, the psychedelic explosion as well. The 70s, known for prog rock, disco, punk, funk, classic rock like Zeppelin, Floyd as well. They make strong arguments for innovation. The 1990s, oddly enough, ranked frequently high, especially among millennials, with hip hop and alt rock artists kicking in there, grunge, rap, Brit pop, shoegaze, as you've talked about a lot. The 1950s, by the way, gets credit as the era for the birth of rock and roll. Elvis, Chuck Berry, rockabilly, but it barely tops out in modern polls of what is a favorite decade of music. And then finally, post-2000 decades, the aughts, the 10s, and the 20s, tend to rank lower in all age polls, though younger generations, I find this interesting, like Gen Z, favor the early 2000s due to a more recency bias is what they're calling it on there. So again, I think this comes down to an age and connection with the cultural impact of the music of your era.
Yeah, it does. When you think of the 50s, I mean, that's people older than us. And are they doing the survey? Are they even being really asked? Did they,
Yep.
when they did the survey, did they make sure that, okay, the same amount of people that might be from each, decade that would
Yep.
like that answer this? So it does make a difference. Real young ones, we're going to just say, hey, man, the 2010s, the 2020s, but it still was very interesting. And, hey, we fit right in, Jim,
We do.
70s and 80s. Here we
I
are.
would tend to think that we could call our little tournament and the folks that get to vote on it as being a very unscientific look at this. Looking at some of our numbers,
Huh?
I think we tend to skew a little older, but you never know. Yeah, you never know. We're not trying to diss anyone else out there. So as we get into our picks to represent the decade, Steve, we'll talk a little bit about how this works. Over the next several weeks, we'll be posting. We'll talk about this all day today, but next week and subsequent weeks, we'll just kind of give an update of where the polling stands and talk about how that's going as we narrow down. But this will be a tournament style, an elimination tournament style as we get through. But because of the fact that we're covering 8 decades and we wanted to start this off with the quote 16, I won't say Sweet 16 because that's probably copyrighted, although I just did. But in order to start this off this week and have it end when we want to, we need to start with 16 records. And there's only 8 decades between the 1950s through the 2020s that Steve and I are covering. So what we have done, again, mathematically to make this work, is we're going to have a qualifier round. How's that? So Steve and I have each picked one record from each decade, equaling 16 records. We're going to put those 2 records that we've picked in that particular decade up against each other for the first week for this qualifier round. And then it'll be up to you folks to vote. And we'll have a poll up on our Facebook page. We'll put it up on the links in the descriptions where you can vote on this. So this week, Steve, everybody gets to vote on this qualifier round about what record they feel that we have chosen out of those 2 best represent the music of that decade.
Okay.
And
yes. And again,
hopefully it'll
this was
work.
going to tell you if you're, just going to tell you if you're cool or not. So I'm just telling you, folks.
And so next week, obviously, then once we have these qualifiers picked, we'll announce who the winners are next week. That will be our essentially the 8 decades going up against each other. One album may have been stuff you've picked, may have been stuff I picked. Will advance into that 8, and that's when the decades start going up against each other, and that's when things are going to get interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
So, do you have you made any contacts with any of the sports bet places to see if they want in on this action?
Well, I'm hoping that at the advertising that comes in will be FanDuel talking about this, and
They'll
it's
knock
the
on our
hottest
door.
thing out there right now. Yes, exactly. And I'm just going to be posting on Instagram and Facebook my things and just say, this is the greatest album ever, and feel free to chime in on this link here.
You're going to try and
Agree with
stack it. I get you there. All right.
yeah, yeah.
Your vinyl community reach as mayor is probably a little up there more than mine, but we'll have to see. All right. Are you ready to get into this here? This is the qualifier
Yes, let's
round,
go,
and
man.
we're going to start with the
Yep.
1950s. This is the era that started it all, and neither of us have picked an Elvis record to help guide us through. That's not to say that you can't take Elvis into consideration, but this week you're just voting on one of 2 records to represent in the poll in the tournament down the line. So mine is from my 50s collection, Steve, is very, very sparse.
Yes, I agree.
I only have a few. So why don't we start with you? Because I know you're going the
Okay.
jazz route, aren't you?
Yeah, 50s for me is jazz. I do have a couple Wanda Jackson albums that I really like, but it is 50s because jazz, because to me the 50s was jazz was taken off. And mine's is John Coltrane's Blue Train.
Fantastic.
If Yeah, if you're new to jazz, this is an outstanding album to start with and get into. It's melodic, it's rhythmic. It's just a great listen. If you're into jazz, you would have this because it is Coltrane and it is such an important, iconic jazz album. This is the Tone Poet that came out, the fancy pants Tone Poet. So it is just incredibly good. And it just blows me away. I mean, it has Lee Morgan's on trumpet on there, Paul Chambers is on bass, Philly Joe Jones on drums, Coltrane on sax, and Kenny Drew on piano, and Curtis Fuller trombone. Uh, awesome album. To me, it represents the 50s and how exciting jazz was.
Now that one, Steve, by the way, just on the collectible side of things, an OG of that is fairly valuable. Now, and I
It
mentioned I
is
don't have a lot of
extremely.
50s, but I do have a copy of that in my collection. Blue Train by Coltrane is just a favorite, and I do have an OG of that buried somewhere. But for
Dang.
but for my 1950s record, I took a completely different genre route, Steve, and I have chosen Gunfighter Ballads by Marty Robbins. Now, this one was in the country circles in the 50s, and this is from 1959. So it's a later in the decade one. But it has become tremendously influential record for country artists down the line as we get into, the more modern country artists like Sturgill Simpson, for example. The storytelling aspect of this and the country music that comes through has become a way to have modern artists look for this. So it's tremendously influential. It was a very big seller in the late 50s, but more so into the 60s, but it was released then. But Marty Robbins' Gunfighter Ballads, that's what I've chosen. So, folks, in the first round of this, we're going to get Coltrane versus Robbins, and you're going to have to pick which one of these goes forward. And I don't know as if we're going to take any more heat for not picking any Elvis or Big Bopper or something like that, but Bill Haley. This is what we've gone with, folks. So you can choose from there.
Yep.
All right, now here's where it gets interesting, Steve. The 1960s, where rock and roll has taken off and it is really starting to become a cultural force.
Yeah, yeah, and it's changing. Obviously, the Beatles were a big part of that, but we're not going to do Beatles,
Nope.
kids. Sorry. I have Pink Floyd, Piper at the Gates of Dawn.
Mm.
And this this album just blew minds. Well, actually, it blew a lot of minds because of the LSD. So, I mean, that was part of the reason everyone's tripping out at their concerts with the lights and everything. But this ushered in new genres, space rock, psychedelic, and it is such a strong album. It has Sid Barrett is at his prime. He's not completely nuts yet. And so he's making these quirky songs that are very, very interesting. I mean, but you have See Emily Plays on here, Lucifer Sam, the Gnome, I really don't like. Interstellar
Yep.
Overdrive is on this, which it is still, I mean, they played that all the time going forward. But really iconic album of the 60s that to me changed so many people's minds on what music can be and got them excited. Beatles did the same thing, but this is has such a lasting impact out there.
And I believe
Exciting
that's
album.
67 or 68 on that is when that was
I
originally
believe
released.
it's 67. It's
67, that's correct.
67.
And the thing
And
is, too,
and
you
that's
you
a
just
nice OG that I bought at Radio Wasteland too, by the way,
I
Jim.
remember that. I have one of those also, sir. And that one was actually very close, very, very close to my list for my representative for the 1960s. You know my affinity for Floyd as well.
Mm-hmm.
But as you mentioned, Steve, that one has led to so many influences in psychedelic rock, even into shoegaze and more modern
Yeah.
psych. It comes in there too. All right, so this is going to be a tough one, Steve. This is where, as I mentioned, things get interesting because I have chosen a rock album from 1969. So again, I'm kind of skipping over most of the decade, both of us, and going right straight to the end of that decade. But going up against Floyd is going to be Led Zeppelin 2. This
Mm.
did better, outsold Led Zeppelin's debut album from a couple of years before. But this one lays the foundations for so many other artists to follow. It still has some blues influence riffs you can feel from that first Led Zeppelin album, but it takes things in a much more hard rock vein. Not quite heavy metal, not quite blues, not quite Brit or anything of that nature, but this is, I think, where Zeppelin really began to take in their own and became a tremendously influential album for down the line. You got Whole Lot of Love, which essentially you could call a heavy metal tune by now, by standards today, just the way that kicked that album off. What Is and What Should Never Be is just gets that cycle trip on there. Heartbreaker, also a good hard rock song. Moby Dick, the drums that Bonham kicks out in that are just absolutely phenomenal. Thank You is just a very light, it's a beautiful song as that comes through. It's just a great song. And of course, Bring It On Home wraps the album up. So I have chosen this to represent the 60s as the time frame. You've got the psychedelic rock, but we now begin moving into the hard rock side of things. Side note, this is that Robert Ludwig cut. So I do have that floating in the collection, and it's a beautiful one. All right, so the 60s, Steve, I think really take us to not only literally, but figuratively to get us into what the 70s would become with music. Hard rock, as we mentioned, there's disco, there's funk, there's other jazz. The jazz gets more experimental into the 70s as well. But I think we're both kind of taking a different tack as far as our 70s records go, aren't we?
Yeah, I think it's 70s was difficult.
Yeah.
I know last year in the bracket, I picked Boston's debut that I'd put in there because that to me is just a perfect album. But when I think of the 70s, I think CBGBs. And the very first band that wasn't a country band to go into CBGBs was Television. And so I have Television's Marquee Moon. When it comes to guitar solos, everybody goes and they play Stairway to Heaven. I mean, it's so much so that even when Wayne's World said a sign on there, no Stairway to Heaven to be played.
Yep.
But to play a Tom Verlaine solo is extremely difficult. It is so different, so odd, very original. There's definitely Velvet Underground influence with this, which I did not pick a Velvet Underground album for the 60s, by the way. Well, I guess so because I didn't say it, right? Yeah. But this says See No Evil, Friction, Marquee Moon. Some of these songs go on for a long time. You know, they throw Television in with punk, but it's not. I don't. Television's television.
Yep.
They were so different, and this shows what can be done. The guitar playing is incredible. Tom Verlaine, it's totally different thing. You know, and I heard Verlaine on other albums later on, and it's just you could always tell. You know what? You would hear this guitar and go, Tom Verlaine. There is no doubt about it, his playing. So I think this is such an iconic album of the 70s and just a phenomenal group. If there's a list of all-time greatest albums, Television Marquee Moon will be on it.
All righty. I have chosen for my 1970s champion. No surprise here, Steve. I avoided Floyd. You took care of that. But I'm going to go with a Rush album for the 1970s, and I'm going to pick 2112. All right, so this one I think exemplifies some very early Rush work, post their blues influence stuff, but they're getting into their own as far as the lengthy storytelling and the narrative of the albums go. This is a prog rock album. This is a hard rock album, and it is a Rush wearing kimonos on the back album. So, side one is 2112. It's an epic piece that spans the entire side. That is, as I mentioned, hard rock and prog. Now, I could have gone some other directions with prog rock in through there. A lot of other great stuff in my collection. Yes, Lee Merriweather, That's more the space rock side of things, obviously. But I chose to go with this, A, because of my affinity for Rush, but also B, because I think that this exemplifies where things were in the mid 70s. This came out in 1976, and it may look like disco on the back, but it's all serious hard rock on the front when it comes to their kimono wearing stuff. Favorite Rush album of mine? It is way up there, and I think would be a good one to go forward and represent that transformative time in the 70s where things were trying to take hold as far as are we being hard rock and prog together? This is what we get.
Okay. All right.
Now,
Shocked. I'm shocked.
You are.
Rush.
The 80s were difficult for me, Steve. I don't know about you. The 80s were the toughest. I have, as we mentioned a couple of weeks back with Steve on our podcast, I am a fan of all 80s music. I started that decade with hard rock, coming off of Rush and into the, things like Spirit of Radio and Free Will and Like off of Permanent Waves and into Moving Pictures. But AC/DC, Def Leppard, all of that stuff in the early 80s. But then as I entered college, I found college radio music and jangle pop, as you have convinced me to call it, instead of college radio music. But there's so much more. There's 80s pop. The 80s are a tough decade to pin down because everything exploded in multiple different directions at that point. And
it did. MTV.
MTV,
blame
exactly.
them
You
for a lot of
cannot underestimate the importance of that, kicking it out. So I think when folks are voting in the tournament in the qualifier round, this is going to be one of the more difficult decades for people to choose from. I'd like to think you've got a powerhouse coming through, and mine may be a bit of an underdog, but don't underestimate it.
Yeah. Michael Jackson's Thriller is not what I'm showing.
It is not.
But that was the power. Huh?
That was the powerhouse. Yes.
Yeah. Prince's Purple Rain.
Wow.
Purple Rain, Purple Rain. Man. Okay. So 80s was very, very hard for me. You're right. There's Replacements. There's Zuskadoo. I mean, all these groups I adore. But this really, it kind of changed. It changed funk. It influenced so many people going forward. Here's this little 5'2" guy out there playing these massive guitar solos and getting the parents' resource music, whatever, all upset because of his lyrics. I mean, they were just pissed off at this album, especially Darling Nikki.
Yep.
When Doves Cry, Let's Go Crazy on here. I Would Die for You. Wow, it put the movie. You know what? I've never seen the movie Purple Rain.
Really?
I've never seen it.
Then.
I just saying like, will it be as good as the album? I mean, I just like the music. Exactly. My whole thought was I'd just be disappointed and go, God, that Prince guy really can't act. So what the hell? If I watched Purple Rain, I'd watch it because I want to see the Time perform. I love the Time, but this showed, Prince was on the fringe. He's had these albums coming out. This put him on the map and put him as a star out front, and that eventually he could change his name to a symbol and get away with it. That's how powerful this album was. I mean, none of us can do that. But Prince could. Prince's Purple Rain, Prince and the Revolution. Wow. Jeez.
That is an album too, I think, that transcends the genres of rock, pop, and funk. I mean, all of them together in something that quite really hadn't been heard before in that part of the decade.
It did. You're right. It meshed it all together, and you could just see, his influences were everywhere, and he did that so fast. I mean, he just sat down and bam, put this thing out. Just, there you go.
All right. My choice for the 80s, as mentioned, Steve, this is a tough one. I could have gone with AC/DC, Back in Black. Could have gone with another Rush album. I could have gone with a couple of punk records from the Dead Milkmen and like, but I'm trying to think of something that was going to be fairly representative in the middle of the decade coming from Athens, Georgia, and I went with an REM album. And then even then I had trouble narrowing down an REM album to kind of pick and choose. I wanted really to go with Eponymous, but that's a compilation, and we said no compilations coming through, but that was one that was released. So I chose instead Life's Rich Pageant. simply because I feel that this is one of REM's. They've come into a little bit more maturity by the 1986 when this came out. It still has that mix of a lot of their great sound, but is a overall very well balanced album. Begin to Begin, I believe these days. What if we give? What if we give it away? Fall on Me, just a fantastic song in there as well, and Swan Swan H. So this, I think, college radio, jangle pop. It's that borderline between lighter rock and pop in a lot of cases that REM was really known for. And so I don't know how that's going to stack up against Purple Rain because I picked this one before I knew what yours were going to be. So we'll have to see how our viewers and listeners decide to go. But I think REM is, for me at least, a good representative of the decade of the 80s in music. And yeah, we could have gone Madonna. There were so many other ways to go in that direction in that decade.
Yeah, that was very, very tough decade. I also struggled in the 90s because rap was so good. I mean, there was just so many great albums, rap, but there's a lot of electronic music. I mean, I love the 90s, but I went with My Bloody Valentine, Loveless.
There we go.
And this Loveless, when you listen to groups today and they ask about, what album influenced you, Loveless comes up from My Bloody Valentine again and again. It is the shoegaze genre. It started it. Now, the shoegaze genre did not last long in the 90s because music changed to Britpop.
Yep.
And people really liked the Britpop. But shoegaze continues to go, and in fact, it's gotten a lot stronger as the years go by. And now I pick up a lot of shoegaze groups. This has the incredible Only Shallow, which is on every kind of compilation there is, especially when you're thinking of the 90s. This came out in 91, and it took me a long time to be able to finally get an original of this sucker because it's gone through the roof. I had one, it's like, oh my God. But I had to have it. To me, it's an essential album of my collection and something that I never tire from. So My Bloody Valentine, Loveless. Wowzers.
Now, I went kind of in a bit of a different direction. And again, this is, to me, the 90s, picking something like a Nirvana album would have been like picking the Beatles in the 60s. It's a little too obvious, not to downplay the amount of influence and impact that that grunge had on the 90s through bands like Nirvana and Soundgarden and the like. But I chose to go angsty girl power to represent the 90s with Alanis Morissette and Jagged Little Pill. I mean, you could pick other Four Non Blondes, the Indigo Girls on the lighter side, kind of picking through there. But Jagged Little Pill from Alanis Morissette, I think, carries a little bit of that grunge undertone through the guitar work that comes through on here. But with her voice and her songwriting, it's just a very powerful and I think emotive part of music in the 90s that was there. And I think that this one is probably one of my essential albums. I don't remember if I picked this last year or not. I think it may have been in there. But to me, this is one to have in. All I Really Want, You Ought to Know, that thing was just a powerhouse video as well. Head Over Feet, Wake Up, right through you. Song after song after song on Jagged Little Pill is just a standout for me. And I think that this one is a good representative of where music was in the mid-90s. This was 1995, I believe. So right mid-decade. Yep, 1995, right mid-decade this came out.
Yeah, that is a iconic album of the 90s. It's the only Alanis Morissette I really need. I know she did some other great stuff. She's still putting out music.
Are you
but
saying
that
that's the only one you really want? That's all I really want?
Yeah. That's the one I need.
No, okay.
That's the one I need. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So
all right.
We now switch to the millennium. We come into the year 2000. The computers have flipped out on New Year's Eve and ended society. Oh, wait, no, that didn't happen. Music carried forward into the 2000s, though. And This was also a little tougher for me. I'm growing into a part of my collection where there's not as much as the 80s,
Hmm.
less in the 90s.
Yeah.
You know, I'm 70s, 80s all the way, but the 2000s were a tough one because of that. But that's not because I don't think there was some great music. You've got a good one though.
Yeah. Yeah, for the 2000s, I mean, vinyl hadn't really come back yet, and
Nope.
so it was all CDs, which I don't have anymore. So I was buying a lot of music, but the one I chose, and this is a special edition. This is the White Stripes, White Blood Cells, and this is their third album, and this is one that came out from Third Man Records. It again, special edition, came with a beautiful book with handwritten lyrics on there, and lots of pictures of Jack and Meg. This is the third album, and this is when they really got their act together and it came out. It was just a powerhouse rock album. It shows what two people can do. I mean, Jack White's guitar playing is incredible, but Meg really drums. I mean, I like the power that she puts into her drumming. And I always find that exciting. It's kind of like Maureen Tucker, the Velvet Underground. She had her own style, and Meg does too. And so, this White Stripes put them on the map. Suddenly they became one of the biggest bands in the world, and especially after their next couple albums that came out, really established them as one of the top bands. And this is to me the one that got them started, White Blood Cells. So yeah, it was a great way. This came out in the early aughts, and it was a great way to get things started there and showing rock is not dead. All this electronic going on, rock's not dead. The White Stripes will prove it.
And I went non-electronic for mine, but we are going to start looking at the indie side of things, the independent side.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, the indie folk-ish side of things with Mumford and Sons and Sigh No More. This one was released toward the end of the decade, 2009, but it's just a really good album to put forth from them. It established Mumford and Sons as a powerhouse in the indie rock side of things. A little bit heavier, so it wasn't. I used indie folk, and I think that that's kind of a misnomer because they are a lot more than that. Just because they've got that folkish sound in there, it doesn't really carry forward. I saw them perform live in the 2000s at one point went with my daughter, but Sigh No More is on here. After the Storm, Winter Winds, Roll Away the Stone. Just a great album all the way around, as is Babel, their other album. I think it was a toss-up between those two. But I think Babel, I have to remember when that came out since this was the end of the decade. We're counting that in the 2010s, or the 2000s rather, in the indie rock side of things. The 2010s, Steve, even more interesting. I'm getting mellow at my older age, I think.
I have a lot of albums from that decade, but it's groups no one knows, shall we say. I mean, it's so I've now moved into this more obscure bands, but that excite me. But the one I found, this is considered one of the best albums of that decade, and it's from Atlanta. I was going to say Alana Morissette, Lana Del Rey. It's just another one. Lana Del Rey, NFR, Norman fucking Rockwell. And I said a bad word, and I apologize. My mom's going to call me after this. So I have to deal with that. But this is her best album that she put out. She talks about gun violence. She talks about climate control. She really gets into different subjects instead of just heartbreak and went in deep. If you're going to have one Lana Del Rey album, NFR is the one to have. I mean, I have quite a few of hers. I like her voice. She just has this sultry type voice. She also makes on her albums 500 different album cover versions that can make any collector just put a gun to their head. God. And I'm pretty sure Taylor Swift was watching and go, well, that's a cool idea.
Yep.
So, wow. So, yeah, I decided to pick an album that maybe people knew instead of most of my stuff from the odds. They go, oh, what? Oh, who? So Lana Del Rey.
Well, I'm kicking off one from a guy that got his start in the late 80s, really came to prominence in the 90s. But this album from 2014, Beck and Morning Phase, is just one of
Mm,
my favorite albums of all time. It's a very mellow
yeah.
album. It's from his mellow phase, if you will, in through there.
Hmm.
And I was working. I was still teaching at the time at the college level, but working with a radio station. And I had a radio show around that time as well. And I remember when this came out and I started listening to it, I predicted early on. I said that album is going to win a Grammy for Beck, and it did. So we can say the Grammy, one of his, and I forget if this is the one where he almost got chased off stage or not. But Cycle, Hard as a Drum, Morning. This is just a very well flowing together album, and very deserving of the Grammy that Beck won. And if you listen to stuff like Loser or any of his other heavier stuff, you hear this and you go, "What is up with Beck? Is he there?" No, it was just his mood with this particular
Hmm.
album. So I've chosen this to represent the 2010 era from 2014, Beck and Morning Phase, which now
You know, and a
carries
while
us up.
back we
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, when we talked about artists that change, the
Yep.
chameleons and that, and Beck is just he's one of the best at it,
Yep.
and that is a beautiful album.
It is. So now we get to the 2020s, but we're only 5 years and a couple of months in. So this was a tougher one for me also. You pick up a lot of new stuff, so yours was probably a little more difficult to choose from. Mine was difficult because I only had a few, and granted, there's some stuff there. I've got some Sturgill Simpson and the like, and the Brown Sabbath it was on my list as well. I've chosen a good one, I think, though. But what do you have to kick off
Yeah.
our current decade?
Well, the current decade, I have lots of bands like Grocery Bag,
Yeah.
okay, that you don't know who they are. It's such great music. I I am loving this decade for music, for new music coming out. I'm buying maybe 50 albums, new artists a year because there is so much great stuff. Sorry, Jim, there really is so much. And every week on my early morning show, I generally will show a brand new album from this year because it's exciting music. But the one I chose is Madhu Makhtar, and this is Africa Victim. And Madhu Makhtar is a guitarist extraordinaire. It is Terang music. It's desert blues. Now, desert blues has that music's been out. Tenarwan is the group that really they started in the aughts putting out desert blues albums, and they are extremely good, so good. What you get off desert blues is almost a hypnotic type feel. When you think back, Brian Jones did that thing with the drummers down in Africa, I think Morocco.
Yep.
Uh, you you have that feel, this hypnotic feel, and you get that with the Terang music. Madhu Makhtar, he's international now. This is the album that put him on the map. You will get some of the most incredible guitar playing that you're ever going to hear, but yet behind him is this rhythm section that just keeps it going and going and going, and you don't want it to end. It sounds so neat. So for this decade, I think this is just it's a decade of incredible music, and Madhu Makhtar is a big part of it.
And the decade is not over yet, so we may have to revisit
Yep.
this. Okay, I picked something from 2022. We've talked about this a lot before, but Wet Leg and their self-titled album Wet Leg. This was, I think, revolutionary. I don't want to use that word too harshly here, but it took the indie rock and stuff from the early 2000s and 2010s and carried it forward with a little bit of electronic, a lot of post-punk, and a lot of more adult-oriented lyrics kicking through here
Yeah.
through Wet Leg. But it put it together with such catchy hooks, especially with the song Shays Lounge, that you couldn't really resist this. And I remember when this came out, I think we were doing the show at this time still too.
Yeah.
It floored both of us. And I'd not
Yeah.
heard anything like this in a new group and a new album in quite some time. And it was thoroughly exciting to listen to. And it still is to this day. Their second album, I do like their new album, The Moisturizer, but I think
Yeah.
this one edges it out because of just the uniqueness, the newness that it felt when it came out in 22.
My problem with that album is I listen to it and then it stays in my head for days. I mean, at night I wake up and I just hear, just it's all just one phrase, but it won't go away, which tells
That
me it's a great album.
that is the hook that carries through, especially in Shay's Lounge. Whatever reason,
Oh
it's
my
that kind,
God.
it's the earworm that kicks you to it. Okay,
Hmm.
folks, we have covered 8 decades in the past 45 minutes or so. And now it's going to be up to you to, in this qualifier round, decide on each of these albums that Steve and I have shown. Which of these records carries forward into the main tournament to represent that decade? And Steve, I have put together a nice little graphic of our March Vinyl Madness that folks will get to see. We'll post this up on our Facebook page and we'll share it personally. We'll put it up on there and put a link to it. But this is a little bracket that will carry through the entire March Vinyl Madness tournament as we find out which decade, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, or the mid 2020s as we are now, is the best decade for music. And I think I wanted to stress again, Steve, when folks are voting, especially in the weeks to come, it's not so much the albums that we picked, but it's the decade that they represent. And you want that decade to go forward because that is your favorite decade of music. Not to say that you don't have a say in the rest of these, because we need you folks to kick in and help us narrow this down.
Yep.
Quite the bracket, isn't it?
Exactly. It is quite the bracket, and we're just going to find out the cool people versus the not cool people. So I'm excited to see that.
So again, folks, if you're watching, you can see the bracket, and if you're listening, we'll put a link in the description for you to check it out too. But this qualifier round, as we said, you're going to vote on which of the albums Steve and I have shown today that move forward to represent the decade. So we've got Marty Robbins versus John Coltrane, Wet Leg versus Madhu. I'm going to say that right, Makhtar. Did I get that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Rush versus Television. That's going to be a toughie. The White Stripes versus Mumford and Sons. The most difficult battle right now, Led Zeppelin versus Pink Floyd in the 60s. Beck versus Lana Del Rey. REM versus Prince. And Alanis Morissette versus My Bloody Valentine.
And when do they have to vote by Jim? When do the votes need to be in?
we have to close off the voting each week by Sunday morning because we record these podcast episodes on Sunday morning. So if you're watching this on Sunday night, you've got a week to get your votes in. But it'll be an online poll. We'll have a couple, maybe one. It'll probably be a Google document first. If I can put a poll up on YouTube easy enough, that might happen. And we'll mix the two together to try to get our votes for this. But again, folks, the qualifier round, this is up to you. Which of these 16 records go forward to represent their respective 8 decades of music?
Will we be accepting write-in votes, Jim?
I don't think so, but they can comment all they like, and we will bring them in. We'll take that into consideration. But I think we're kind of locked in with these, Steve. That's why we're the hosts, right?
That's right.
And if you folks take us to task, but I think we gave our reasons pretty well why we didn't choose Elvis, why we didn't choose the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, or I didn't put the Bee Gees in for the 70s. We probably could have put disco in there because that's very representative of the 70s.
It is.
And at the bottom of my pile, Steve, I forgot about this. One of the biggest selling records of the 1950s, that's not Elvis. I mean, Elvis outshines everybody. I had to dig this out of store stock, but one of the biggest selling records of the 1950s was the soundtrack to South Pacific.
Yeah, you should have put that one up, Jim.
I did not put that one in the bracket. I don't think we need to because I don't have that in my collection. How's that?
Oh, okay.
All right, folks, you have been listening to and watching Two Guys Talking About Records, a vinyl community podcast. And we want you to head to our Facebook page and our descriptions in both the Believe, which then you'll see on Spotify, iHeart, and the like, and the description in our YouTube channel of this episode. You will see the link to vote in our March Vinyl Madness. Any predictions, Steve? Or where are you laying your money down on the sports bet?
Well, I'm just going to lay it down on my albums because I know I got the coolest albums,
You
Jim. It's
do.
pretty simple.
And Steve's still the Who stings from last year, but we'll see what
Yeah,
happens
it
this
does.
year.
Yeah. Yeah. Folks, stop that. Just stop doing that to me.
All right, folks. Thank you so much for being here this week. We'll see how the voting goes and give you an update on next week's episode as Steve and I continue each week talking about records. Till then, my name is Jim, and I own a record store.
I am Steve, a record collector. Bye, everyone.